Hello, and welcome back to Precon Decon. For real this time. I'm done with experimenting with different types of videos, those deck building things. I'm just going to go back and I'm going to talk about Magic the Gathering Precons because that's what I started out doing, and that's what I've really felt like doing again. So here we are. We're going to actually do something a bit different here, and we're going to go all the way back to the very start of Precon Decon, which is all the way back season 1, nearly 3 years ago when I started out this journey. I started out this project of like, right, I'm going to do a video about every single Magic the Gathering precon, and that's what I ended up doing, and it was great fun. And honestly, I've been kind of nostalgic for it because since finishing that, I've been honestly feeling kind of adrift and like, oh, I feel like I need another little project to. Hence why I was doing Get Decked and why I've been doing sort of other little things as well. I sort of dabbled a little bit with doing battle reports. I don't think they were super popular or honestly that good, but sort of gave it a go. But really where my passion is talking about these precon products, and there are some precon products coming out this year that I'm probably going to talk about. I really want to talk about the Final Fantasy starter kit when that gets released. But yeah, this was the original project that I was going to talk about. All of these sets, all the pre-constructed decks released in these sets, and this is over 70 sets. And as you can see, I divided them amongst all the different seasons. I mean, if you somehow, if this is the first video of this you're seeing, I have done a video for every pre-constructed deck in these sets. So please go and check the playlists, go and look at them. I sort of divide them to seasons, and like the season thing actually is pretty interesting. I never intended it for it to happen. They to me like felt like quite normal, quite sensible breaks. For example, season 1 is all the decks with the pre-modern frame. Then season 2 is when they were still called intro decks or theme decks even, and that was sort of up to Shards of Alara where they got repackaged. And then season 4 was kind of when they got restructured again. They turned back into 60 card decks, and then season 5 was in the new Pioneer card frame. So it made sense to me to break them up into seasons and to make the project a little more doable. But yeah, it was such a huge accomplishment. I really enjoyed going through all these sets and talking about them, having all this kind of nostalgia, and obviously people really enjoyed it as well because they were watching the videos and commenting on them. There was a diehard group who always commented on these videos, whether it was their experiences of them or like with if they'd ever bought them, if they played with them, if they changed them, if they wanted to get them, all that kind of stuff. And it was just really fun to talk about these old cards and the memories associated with it, and the nostalgia, because I'm sort of going off a little bit here. I will talk about this in a minute. I am completely unscripted here. I'm back in front of the Google Slides, no script. I'm just it's complete nonsense here. So really sorry if this is too rambling. But my intention with the Precon Decon thing was always because like those pre-constructed decks were, I feel like, such an important thing of the hobby. Like so many people got into the hobby thanks to a pre-constructed deck, thanks to one of these theme decks or intro decks or whatever they were called. And I just feel like they've been relegated to history. Like no one really talks about them, and like really I think they're a very important part of the hobby, because a lot of us get into the hobby of it and they stay in the hobby because you have a product that was fairly cheap, it was fairly accessible, it's just fun to get them out of the box and play. Not a super high competitive level, just casual kitchen table. This is long before Commander. I would argue even now that the Commander precons, while very good from what I understand, they're not exactly the most budget friendly options, because over here in the UK at least they usually go for about like 40-50 pounds, which is like a lot of money to put into a pre-constructed deck if you're just trying to get into the hobby and you don't really know much. Whereas these precons, when they're about I say over here in the UK they're about a tenner, that's like a much more accessible price point. Anyway, too much rambling about why I did the project in the first place. But what I've done for each of those seasons, I did do for each season I did like a top and a bottom 5 of each of the each of the seasons, and just say like, oh, these are my favorite ones, these are my least favorite ones. And people kept asking me like, oh, when you've done, are you ever going to go back and do you like an overall top 5? And I always said like, oh, probably not. But now we're here, and I'm going to do an overall. I'm going to go through every set in each season that I've done, and in each of those sets, I'm going to say which was the best precon I think out each of those sets. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that in season 1. If people like this, I'm going to carry through. I'm going to do it for season 2, season 3, season 4, season 5. Won't do it for season 6. That was Planeswalker decks. There are only 2 decks per set. But yeah, we're going to do it here and see if people like it. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're the sort of person that already likes hearing me talk about old precons. So yeah, I thought it'd just be a fun idea for another video, really. So let's quickly clarify what I mean by best, because it is a very subjective term. Obviously, the way I'm using it in this video is it's basically, for me, best is either going to be the strongest deck or it's going to be my favorite deck. I will lean towards more like what my favorite is, and favorite usually does mean it is the strongest, or vice versa. But there can be times where a deck is probably the best because like in how it's put together, how it's made, and like I might not particularly like it, but I think like okay, I have to admit this is probably the strongest deck out of the set. But mostly I'm going to lean towards like this is my favorite one. This is the deck that I would most want to play out of them, and yeah, I say it is just my opinion. You may disagree, but that's what the comment section is for. If I've said some of these is like I think this is the best one out of these four, by all means put a comment down below saying like I disagree with you. I think in this set this one is the best. That's great. We'll have a chat about it. I love that. I love talking about these decks. Like there is no wrong answer here. So yeah, without any further ado, we're just gonna get into it. We're gonna start looking at Tempest. So this is all the way back in October 1997, which I'm gonna take a guess maybe is maybe a bit older than some of the people potentially watching this video. But yeah, so we'll get into it. Let's and I'll try and do my best as well to remember each of the decks as well, and that's going to be a real test of memory. So yeah, thankfully these season 1 decks were pretty uncomplicated in how they were put together. We're not going to look at deck lists. I'm going to do a brief summary of what the deck was. So in Tempest we had Deep Freeze, Flames of Wrath, the Slivers, and the Swarm. So Deep Freeze was like a blue-white control deck. Flames of Wrath was red-white. It was predominantly red. I think there was like one white card in there. So it is basically a mono-red deck, which is just kind of like burn and aggro. The Slivers, the first time the Slivers showed up, and it was in blue-black. Not the best colors, I think, for the Slivers. They're having their debut. I would have maybe made this green-white personally, or green-white-red or something. But it's kind of actually a control deck. The Slivers are not really there doing their best thing, I suppose. And the Swarm, which is like just a green-white goes wide creatures deck. So out of all these, I think the Swarm's the best one. What I'm going to do as well is kind of show like I think some of the better cards out of the deck as well, or like some of the things that help define it as a deck. So yeah, the Swarm had two really, really good cards. And it had Allure and it had Recycle. This just let you just chainsaw through the deck because Allure lets you cast creatures for mana value 3 or less for free, and Recycle is whenever you cast a spell, you draw a card. So yeah, and considering it's like a green-white weenie deck, super, super good. Like the other three are kind of okay. Deep Freeze was the very first one I talked about, so I'm always going to have a bit of nostalgia for that one. But out of the four, yeah, I think the Swarm was the strongest one by far. And again, it's one that I probably would have enjoyed playing because who doesn't like going wide with green-white weenies? Right, moving on to Stronghold, March 98. So we've got Call of the Core, which is white-black, features one of my, such a mechanically unique creature type at the time, the Core, where they could shuffle damage around. Migraine was a mono-black discard deck, and a really, really mean one as well. The Sparkler is a blue-red, again, very unique, the Sparkler, because it's blue-red, and it's kind of a time when enemy colour is kind of not really a thing. I know we got Call of the Core there, but mostly it was allied colours being the thing. We didn't really get, enemy color cards like we do these days. But the Sparkler is very, very unique because it has 3 creatures in it, and the rest is all spells and lands. So very, very unique, and a lot of people really like the Sparkler. Because apparently it played pretty good, and it's my very first Precon. So again, I have nostalgia for it. And then the Sparkler, I have no idea. Also, I've just realised I have no idea what art that is meant to be on the Sparkler, like what the face card there is meant to be. That's so weird. I have no idea what card that's meant to be from. And then the Spikes, which is a red-green deck, which featured the titular Spikes, which were a creature that could like move their +1/+1 counters around. Very actually these days it'd be quite a white-greenish kind of thing to do. But anyway. So all these very, very strong contenders, all of these. The Spikes is okay because it's like a red-green aggro, but Call of the Core, Migraine, and Sparkler are in very, very tough competition. And after a bit umming, I did go with Migraine because man, it is really, really well put together, like black discard deck. It is mean. It's got like almost like a full playset of Megrim, if I remember. So many discard effects. It's got Ensnaring Bridge, which is a really excellent rare to have. It's got Bottomless Pit, so it's just forces a random discard every turn. It's really, really good. It's so mean. and yeah, my story about this is, when I bought it at the time, my friend also wanted this deck, and I was on holiday in the States because it was during a time when like you couldn't really get Magic very easily in the UK, and he's saying like, "Oh, if you're going on holiday and you see the Migraine deck, can you also pick me up a copy?" And yeah, went on holiday to the States and saw it, and I picked up a copy for myself and lied. I said, "Nope, that was the only one. So only I get to use the Migraine deck." So yeah, that is my confession there as a dishonest Magic the Gathering player. Anyway, let's move on to Exodus, June 1998. So we got Dominator, which is like mono blue control, whatever. Nothing particularly stands out about it. Groundbreaker, which is a black red land destruction deck, which is insane. Like to have a precon focused all around land destruction. It was just during a time where there were just more land destruction spells and effects. White Heat, which is red white kind of aggro weenie deck, and then Widowmaker, which I'm not sure what the theme was meant to be. I think it was just kind of, I should have looked this up. I think it was just like kind of blue black general like control. Someone's going to correct me in the comments below, but I can't remember exactly what Widowmaker did. I remember not being too wowed by it at the time. I think it was just general sort of control deck. This I thought was a much easier choice because basically it pushed me towards White Heat because the other three are like fine, but they're more slow, control-y, grindy. I just like red white aggro, and also it's so weird because I think red white is always such a perfect color combination for a pre-construct deck because it's a very easy color combination to understand. It's fast, it's aggressive, it usually plays small creatures, be very aggressive, and yet this is one of I think only three red white precons in season one, counting Flames of Wrath, which we looked at, which I said was barely red white. So it's this, and I think one in Nemesis, and then that's it. There's no more red white decks. It is the least represented color combination, I think, in season one, which is crazy. But anyway, yeah, White Heat had limited resources, which is like a really bonkers card, like really good for like a weenie deck, and Reconnaissance, which again is a really really fun card where you can just bounce your attacking creatures out of combat. And I think there was a fair number of creatures in here with first strike, so you could do do first strike damage and then bounce them out with Reconnaissance, which is like a super fun little trick to do. Anyway, so that was Tempest block. We're going to move on to Urza's block now, and I never remember the order of Saga, Destiny, and Legacy, but good thing I've got them on screen. So Urza Saga, 1998. This is when I started playing Magic like a lot more at school and stuff. A group of guys all sort of discovered the hobby, and we're all playing together. Like Urza Saga and Portal, that was kind of what we were playing a lot of. Anyway, so as Saga, we've got the Plague, which is a white-black deck, which is focused all around Pestilence, which is crazy because it's not like it was a new card. It was just this one deck is like, oh yeah, we're just going to do a deck all around Pestilence and stuff, which is like, okay, it's a choice. Sleeper, which is based all around these white enchantment creatures. Yep, Urza Saga had enchantment creatures way before Theros. I've said it before, but suck it Theros. You weren't original in that regard. And yeah, it's these enchantments that become creatures when a certain condition is met. You got red green special delivery. This is all about creatures with echo, so they're usually quite efficiently costed, but the downside you have to pay their echo cost again next turn or they die. And then Tombstone, which is it's notable for being the first three coloured precon in Esper colours, and it's kind of trying to be like a reanimator. It has a lot of cards with cycling, and I guess the idea is you would fill your graveyard with cycling creatures, then reanimate them. Unfortunately, it didn't really have the tools to well. So, small spoiler: Tombstone was not the favorite one. The best I think out of four of these, and it's not even close, is the Plague. This is one that's really really highly regarded by a lot of kind of veteran players because it's really really good. I say it's all based around Pestilence. I think it's got a full playset of Pestilence, and then it's got a ton of creatures which with like protection from black. It's got ways of preventing damage to yourself. It's got like Pariah, so any damage that's dealt to you gets dealt to the creature. So if you put this on a pro black creature, you're immune to your own Pestilence. It's got Worship in there as well, which is a crazy good enchantment where like you just cannot die if you have a creature, and if you're a creature that's got pro black and you keep sweeping the wall with Pestilence, super super good. The Plague is it was one of my top 5 I think out of season 1. Really such a good deck, so well put together. And also it goes really really well with the core if you mix it in there. They're both white black. The core have the ability where they can shuffle damage around. Yeah, so these two go together super well. Right, we're going to look at Urza's Legacy now, February 1999. So we've got Crusher, which is green-white. From what I remember, it's just general aggro. I think just efficient creatures, maybe. Black-red Phyrexian Assault, which I think had all the carrier creatures in, where you sacrifice them to give -X/-X. It's called Phyrexian Assault, but like there's like 4 Phyrexians in it or something. It's just standard. It's just standard like black-red. Kind of like removal and aggro, that kind of thing. Radiant's Revenge, which is a really, really underwhelming blue-white control deck. I got very angry about this when I reviewed this because it's called Radiant's Revenge. Radiant is if you don't know, Radiant is like the proto Avacyn in Magic the Gathering lore. She's like an angel who went crazy and basically made things worse because she went on a crusade. And this is a whole deck named after Radiant's Revenge, and Radiant. There was a card representing her, and it's not in this deck, which I felt was a huge missed opportunity. It made me unreasonably angry. But it's just a very underwhelming blue-white kind of skies control deck. And then Time Drain, which is green-blue, which is nice to see an enemy color deck, based all around the most broken mechanic in Urza's Legacy, which is free spells, which is basically whenever you cast a spell, you can untap a certain number of lands. And perhaps because of that, it's not surprised that I think it's the best one out there. So it's got stuff like Cloud of Fairies and Snap, where they're essentially like free spells. It could have gone, I think it could have gone a lot harder into the theme. It didn't have stuff like Fertile Ground, where you could get extra mana out of lands and untap them that way. But out of those 4, I think it's because it's using such an inherently broken mechanic. It's probably the best one. Yeah. And then Urza's Destiny, June 1999. So we got Assassin, which is just like a mono black whatever. It's just doing mono black stuff. Battle Surge, which has got such a weird theme for the deck. So it's blue-red, but it's all themed around. It has a minor kind of like tribal theme. From what I remember, like minor goblin tribal theme. But it's mostly themed around creatures with haste. Which is the thing, I suppose, to base a deck all around a particular keyword. And not like a block specific mechanic or whatever. So yeah, that was kind of okay, I suppose. Enchanter is, as you can probably guess, like a white-blue deck all based around enchantments and auras and stuff. It's fine. And then Fiendish Nature, which is a black-green deck, which is kind of, I would say, it's sort of similar to, I suppose, green-black archetypes we get these days, like Death Triggers and like Morbid and Caring About the Graveyard, like Recursion and stuff. So yeah, and it was kind of unique in that regard because it was like the first kind of deck I would Precon at least doing that sort of thing. So yeah, I liked Fiendish Nature. Again, had some really good cards in it. Ancient Silverback is just a big efficient beater. Phyrexian Reclamation is like a really, really good enchantment just to keep getting dead stuff back. This had some really, really nice cards in it. All right, then we move on to Mercadian Masques. After the highs of Urzas, we have to go into the lows of Mercadian Masques, unfortunately. But I think some of the decks in here were still okay, as we'll see. So first we had Deepwood Menace, which is a red-green aggro deck. Disruptor, which is black-red. Again, kind of just general doing black-red things like destroying lands, killing creatures. Playing creatures with horrible drawbacks. I was actually I think I was a little too harsh on this one when I did review it. I remember I think I really, really put the screws in on this one. But it's fine. It was just black-red doing black-red things. But there's nothing memorable about it, I suppose. Rebels Call, which is the deck based all around Rebels, which are just super good. So, spoiler for where this is going. And then Tidal Mastery was a very generic white-blue control deck. Yes, obviously it's Rebels Call, because Rebels were just everywhere in Mercadian Masques because they were just so good. Rebels, if you don't know, so Rebels, so in Mercadian Masques you had Rebels and you had Mercenaries. So Rebels were mostly in white, Mercenaries were mostly in black. They had this recruit ability where, so Mercenaries get to, so you can see on Ramosian Sergeant here, has an ability where you can pay a certain cost, tap it, and then you get a Rebel from your library with a higher converted mana cost than the thing recruiting. So whereas Mercenaries do it the other way. So basically Mercenaries recruit down and Rebels recruit up, and obviously Rebels are much better because recruiting up is much stronger, because then you just get into better and better creatures. You also had Chomano Revolutionary in here as well, who was meant to be like in lore he's the leader of the Rebels. It does super bother me still to this day that he is meant to be the leader of the Rebels and he doesn't have a recruitment ability, but it is what it is. You know, so many missed opportunities with cards like that, I suppose. But yeah, Rebel's cool. Definitely, I think the best out of those Mercadian Masques decks. Right, then on to Nemesis. So we got Breakdown, which is a green-blue deck. This is all based around creatures with fading, which is kind of it's kind of proto-vanishing or from Time Spiral. It's basically you get a fairly efficient creature and you only have a certain number of turns to use it before it fades away. It's so it is ultimately a drawback, but you usually get like a pretty efficient creature out of it. Eruption is a red-white deck. This is the last red-white deck of the season. And this is all, again, it's just a fairly standard red-white aggro deck. It's based around some of the Laccolith creatures who had this ability where they could redirect their combat damage if they got blocked, which was kind of fun. Mercenary deck, because we had a rebel deck, so we had to have a mercenary deck. And then Replicator, which is super weird. It comes out of complete nowhere. And it's not like really... It's not hard to explain. It's just it feels so weird as a deck. It's just like right, okay, well we've got fading and we've got like these Laccolith creatures, I suppose, and we've got mercenaries and like we need a fourth one. So Replicator is based around the incredibly unique idea of just having full play sets of stuff. So there was a small cycle in Nemesis of these green creatures where like they sort of had the Squadron Hawk ability where if you played them you then got to search your library for like the other 3 copies of it. And yeah, for that reason I think, because it's just such like a unique idea, just just the fact it uses playsets, so it's a really out of the box, it's a remarkably consistent deck because it just has playsets of things. So you got like Howling Wolf here. This is like when you when it comes into play, you search your library up for 3 other Howling Wolves, which is great. And this is a time as well you've got Spell Shapers, which are creatures that need you to discard cards to have effects. So you know you cast one of your replicate creatures like Howling Wolf, get the other 3, and then you've got discard fodder for Spell Shapers. It also has if I remember, at least 2 Blastoderms, I think, and Blastoderm, which is one of these fading creatures. So it was in the Breakdown deck, where it's whatever it's doing its thing, but it's here as well. And you know, this is just I think a better deck than the Breakdown one. So yeah, it's a weird choice, but I think this one is the best out of the 4. Right, and then on to Prophecy, which is a notoriously underpowered set, but we'll get into it. So we've got Distress, which is a white-black deck, which is using all the Rhystic cards, which were just awful. So Rhystic cards were the gimmick in Prophecy as the thing of like okay, so your Rhystic spell has like has this effect, and unless your opponent pays a certain amount, they have a bigger effect. So, for example, you've got stuff like Rhystic Siphon, which like it drains 5 unless your opponent pays a certain amount, and then it does nothing. Or you have Rhystic Lightning, which is like it does 2 damage, and unless an opponent pays whatever amount, then it does 4 instead. Which just creates this horrible gameplay state because it just means that no one really plays their spells, no one's using mana because you're holding out to pay for Rhystic spells, whatever. So Distress is all based around that, slightly saved by the fact that one of the rares is Avatar of Woe, which is super iconic, fun black creature. Pummel is just a mono green beatdown deck, and that's all it needs to be. It's not playing around with any gimmicks, that's just all it is. You got Slither, which is red-green, based around another one of Prophecy's weird little mechanics, which is having no untapped land, so basically curving out perfectly. So a lot of the stuff in here is like it's like if you've got no untapped lands, this creature gets like a power booster. It gets a keyword or something like that, and it's obviously not very good. Some really horrible rares in it as well. It's just an aggro deck with extra steps, with extra hoops you have to jump through. And then Turnaround is again a very standard white-blue control deck. It does have a Rhystic Study in it, back when Rhystic Study was common, which is bonkers to think about. That used to be like this just bulk 10p common, and now it's just everywhere. And it's super expensive because, I mean, by rights it should have been. It was a very powerful effect. But apart from that, yeah, it's just a very standard white-blue control deck. So out of these 4, it is Pummel. It's like just the mono green Unga Bunga beatdown deck, which I think is the best one, because the other three are dealing with themes and mechanics which are just like so horrible and unfun. It's it's just refreshing just to have a big green dumb deck that just hits things. You got Avatar of Might as one of the rares. You got Vitalizing Wind as the other, which is just this huge board buff. Yeah, it's it's simple, but it gets the job done. All right, so we're going to Invasion now in October 2000. So we've got Blowout, which is just standard black-red thing doing black-red thing, has no particular identity. It's just, again, kills creatures, blows up things. Dismissal, again, is blue-black. It's just a blue-black control deck. Again, has no particular identity or gimmick to it. They're just quite straightforward. Nothing. I would struggle to name some of the cards from it, because they don't. There's just no mechanical identity to them. Heavy Duty is a green-white, again, kind of like go wide beatdown deck. Again, no particular identity to it, I suppose. Spectrum at least has an identity to it because it is a 5-color deck. It's the first 5-color Precon we got, and this is where, because Invasion, like the big theme is like color, right? So color matters. But Spectrum also is starting to use the domain cards, introduce some of those, and it sort of does an okay job at doing 5-color, but it's ultimately, like, again, the card selection is not the best for what it's trying to do. And the rares in this I remember being really weird as well. I'm going to say Heavy Duty, though, just because it has Charging Troll and Armadillo Cloak, and these are two good gold cards that give me a lot of nostalgia, because I had this deck, and I had fun putting Armadillo Cloak on Charging Troll, and there was very little that could deal with that. Yeah, it's there's some other good cards in there as well. You got like Cavu Chameleon and Wax and Wane and stuff. You got some other good cards in there, but it's mostly about Charging Troll and Armadillo Cloak. All right, then we go into Planeshift in February 2001. So we've got Barrage, which is a red-green deck, which is sort of focused around Cavu, which were introduced back then, but also has like a slight gating theme. Gating was a thing in Planeshift where you had some creatures that would come in and you had to return another creature that shared a color back to your hand, and it was sort of a way of doing like ETB effects. Basically, 3 of the decks do that kind of. So Comeback is mostly based around that as gating, like in using and replaying ETB creatures. And again, it's triple colored, which makes it stand out. Domain is another 5-color one, and this is another crack at 5-color. I think this was the best one out of because Apocalypse is a 5-color one as well. I think this was the best attempt at doing the 5-color domain thing in Invasion block, but it still wasn't amazing. And then Scout, which was Naya colors. Again, this was like based around gating and like the battle mages as well, who had like these double kicker costs. So you would the idea was like I guess you would gate creatures in, you would bounce the battle mages back, you'd replay the battle mages with their kickers. It wasn't very good, honestly. So I'm going to say it was Barrage, actually, the red-green Cavu deck. Again, mostly because of a few cards sort of saying it. Flame Tongue Cavu was like an absolute all-star back in the day, and I still think is okay by today's standards for being a 4/2 that comes and does 4 damage to a creature. I still think that's pretty good. And fires a Yavimaya, which was like a really big card at the time. Just general global haste and then be able to sacrifice to give a buff, I thought was pretty good. I am going to have a quibble, though, because I do think a red-green Cavu deck should have been done in Invasion block, because you had 2 really good rares in Invasion, because this is the time when the Precons were only using rares from the set they were released in. So if you'd had a Cavu deck in Invasion, and why wouldn't you? Cavu were like this new creature type, why wouldn't you have a deck showing them off? Then you could have had Cavu Monarch and Cavu Titan, who are both like, pretty good. Yavimaya Cavu as well was there. So very, very odd choice to not have the new creature type shown off in a deck all about them, I suppose, especially when you had like pretty good rares to support them. Right, so we take a little break from Invasion block to quickly look at 7th edition, because 7th edition is the first core set to have Precons in it. So there's 1 per color. They're only 40 cards. So I think they're a lot cheaper, but like it's fine. 7th edition was a set which I think is a little controversial just because a lot of the cards got new art and some of it like doesn't resonate that well. For the most part, I don't mind 7th edition art. I think it's fun to see some of these cards get new art. Some of the new art is really, really nice. And as I say, you've got Precons, who cares? So Armada is just mono white, Bombers mono blue, Decay's mono black, Infestation is mono red, and Wayward is mono green. These are all doing very simple iconic decks doing simple iconic things to show new players like what the color does. So Armada, I think, is just full of life gain and cheap creatures. Bomber is full of bounce and flying creatures. Decay is like just discard and creature kill. Infestation is full of goblins and burn, and Wayward is just big creatures and buff, and I think some auras as well. And out of the 5, I think Infestation is actually pretty solid. You've got it's the only one of these with a sort of like a tribal theme to it. You've got Goblin King in there. This is before he's a goblin, which is like still so weird. Like, but yeah, you got Goblin King in there to give all your guys a buff. It's got Pillage in there, which is like a pretty solid card, I think, to have. So yeah, it's I say it's only 40 cards, but yeah, I think it's okay. Out of the 5, I think all 5 are actually pretty good at being sort of an introduction to the game. But I think Infestation is the best. All right, then we go back to Invasion Block to finish off with Apocalypse. So we've got Burial, which is a Abzan-coloured sort of like a zombie tribal deck, which is pretty fun, pretty interesting. Some really, really nice rares in it as well. We got Pandemonium, which is the final attempt at doing 5 colours, but it's mostly focused, from what I remember, on like the green Penumbra creatures. Like when they die, they leave a token that's a black token that's a copy of them. And again, you got like some domain spells, because like weirdly, all the domain spells are scattered all the way throughout Invasion Block. They're not all in, say, like one set, but whatever. It's just how sets were maybe not as designed as optimally as they could be these days, I suppose. But yeah, Pandemonium's all right. Swoop is green-blue deck based with most like flyers and just like ramp and bounce, that kind of thing. And Whirlpool is a blue-red deck again. It does sort of blue-reddish things of having kind of like evasive creatures and like burn and bounce options. Nothing outrageous, that jumps out really. So I'm going to say it was Burial. As I said, the rares are really, really good. Death Grasp and Phyrexian Arena. Really, really nice. And also, it's just stronger because it's got like this kind of the tribal element. It's got zombies in it, and a bunch of effects that care about zombies. So yeah, this one's pretty good, and it's like in 3 colors as well, which kind of I like. And it's an enemy wedge as well, which is pretty fun. So yeah, I'd say Burial. Swoop and Whirlpool aren't bad. It's just, I don't know, they take up no mental space for me. They're just so generic, and just nothing jumps out. I am going to use this opportunity though, because I didn't talk about this last time, and I've talked about there not being a lot of red-white decks. I'm going to talk about there should have been a red-white deck here there in Apocalypse, right? Because then all colors get sort of represented, all the enemy color types, all the enemy pairs get represented in a way. Burial is obviously doing sort of Golgari and Orzhov there by being triple colored. But yeah, forget that Pandemonium one, the 5 color. Have a red-white one, because there were so many like. You could have had a really good like red-white deck, I think, in Apocalypse. You had Goblin Trenches, could have been a really good rare. Goblin Legionnaires, really solid little common. You could have had all the Flag Bearers. Like the Flag Bearers are a fun little cycle in Apocalypse, and they weren't in any other decks. And I just think this would have been fun. Just seemed, I don't know, a bit of a waste to do one last 5-color deck, I guess. Anyway. All right, so now we're going to move on to Odyssey Block, October 2001. And this is where I think Precons start getting actually pretty good. Mostly because I think color pairs are starting to get more like mechanical identity and stuff. So there are fewer decks that end up being like Blowout or Dismissal and Invasion, where it's just like, here's some black cards and here's some blue cards, mash them together. Going forward, like colors, sets basically have more mechanics to play with, so it's easy to say, you can look at it and say, like, rather than saying like, oh, that's like the blue-black control one, it's like, that's the flashback one, or like that's the threshold one, or that's the zombie one. I don't know, just sets are starting to get more, I guess, more better designed, I guess is the best way to put it. Right, so we got Liftoff, which is a white-blue deck which is based around Threshold and the Mystics, which gets better when they have Threshold. 1-2 Punch is a red-green deck with which was quite surprising because it doesn't have a lot of creatures in it, but it has a lot of spells that create creature tokens, and they have a lot of flashback as well in there. Pressure Cooker is a black-red Threshold deck, which does Threshold differently than the white-blue one, mostly making, I think, like burn spells and kill spells like a little bit better. I think it's got some flashback in there as well. And then Transformatic is the blue-green deck. Blue-green was super good all the way through Odyssey block. It was just the key color combination to have because just everything worked well for it. So Transformatic is again sort of Threshold. It has a lot of flashback in it, and yeah, it's my favorite one. It's just super good. Green blue is so good in Odyssey, whether you like it or not. And I do. I like green blue, and I wasn't really playing a lot at the time, but I would have liked to. I think I would have liked to run green blue, and like it's just a color combination that just got better throughout the block, really. But yeah, so Odyssey had like Wild Mongrel, which was like an absolute MVP at the time. You had stuff like Roar of the Worm. Yeah, a bunch of really, really good green blue cards. Then we had Torment in February 2002. So this is like the black centric deck where all the precons have black in them because that was the whole point. Like, oh, the forces of evil are taking over. So this is really fun that they're all part black decks, but they all do something quite different, which I think is really fun and speaks to Magic's flexibility in terms of design and creativity, that kind of thing. So Grave Danger is the blue black one. And this is all about using your graveyard as a resource, like to pay for costs and stuff. Insanity is black-green and is all about madness, even though unfortunately there weren't that many cards with madness at the time. But you had a lot of discard outlets and stuff. So like Wild Mongrel. So that was pretty fun. Sacrilege is it's a reanimator deck and it's trying so hard to be a reanimator deck, and maybe not a full reanimator, just a general like recursion deck. It's giving it a good go and it's not quite there. And then Waking Nightmares is a nightmare tribal deck based all around the nightmares, which have these effects that like, oh, when they enter something happens, but then when they leave the effect is reversed because like, oh, the nightmare is over essentially. I really like the Waking Nightmares one. It's really, really fun deck because like the nightmares are very cool creatures. They usually have excellent art. Chainer is one of the rares, which is always fun to see because it was rare at the time for us to get legendary creatures in precons, because I mean legendary creatures were just rarer anyway. But yeah, this was really, really fun, and it has quite a lot of playsets actually of like the key nightmares, like Faceless Butcher, the oh god, I can't remember it. The guy on the front box, Soul Scourge. I want to say Soul Scourge, Mesmerizing Fiend as well. Yeah, and then obviously backed up with a bunch of red burns. So yeah, really, really liked Waking Nightmares. That was a really fun one. Right, and then moving into Judgment. So this is the last set in Odyssey block. So this is where now there's no black precons because darkness has been beaten. The forces of light and order have triumphed or whatever. So we got Air Razors, which is a blue-red skies deck with again just like bounce and burn general control options. It's all right. Inundation is a mono white. Like just go wide, just mono white weenies, fine. Painflow is mono green, like big fatties, but from what I remember, this one has only like 18 lands in it or something, and it's got such a high mana curve, and it has such a weirdly low amount of lands. It's super weird if you look at the deck list for it. Like it has, as I say, it's only got like 17 or 18 lands, and there's no reason for it to have so few lands, especially when it's got such a high mana curve. And then Spectral Slam, which is green white, and it's a deck focused all around the phantom creatures, which are these creatures. They come in these. They have 0 toughness. You put counters on them, and when they take damage, you ignore the damage, but you remove a counter instead. And it's by far my favorite because they're just super fun creatures. Because there was about 3 in each color, and then a couple of multicolored ones. So you have stuff like Phantom Centaur is super good. Absolute crime that Phantom Centaur, by the way, has not ever been reprinted in a modern frame. I would love to see Phantom Centaur in a modern frame. But yeah, he's 2/0, comes in with 3 counters. If damage would be dealt to him, prevent the damage, and then you remove a +1/+1 counter from him. Really important to note, because it came with a rules pamphlet that specifically says, like, oh, if you can give your phantoms permanent toughness, because it's not dependent on removing the counter. They're 2 separate things. You remove counter if it does have one, but you don't have to remove the counter to prevent the damage. And with Phantom Centaur having protection from black as well, it means it couldn't be instantly killed by stuff. They were super, super good. I loved playing this deck. This is one I owned. I really enjoyed it. Had Mirari's Wake as well as a rare, which is super good. It's like an Anthem effect and also doubles all your mana. Really, really fun deck. Really, really fun. Right, and then we get into Onslaught. So this is the block that cares all about creature types. So we got Bait and Switch, blue and black. This is a deck all about changing creature types and getting benefit for doing that. There's some really fun cards and fun tricks you can do in here. It is a little fiddly, but it's fun. It's fun, I think. Celestial Sort is white, blue, soldiers and birds, I want to say, and it has a bunch of the Gust Cloak creatures, which have the ability that if they get blocked, you can just remove them from combat. It's like a rare, like reconnaissance. Red green devastation. This is just beasts, just big beasts beat down, and then Ivory Doom, which is white black clerics. Now, back when I did my top 5, I said Ivory Doom was my favorite because I liked it as white black clerics. I think clerics are a cool creature type, especially when they're in white black. I like the kind of juxtaposition there. I went with Celestial Assault though because even though I like the creepy clerics, I think I have to say this is one where I like Celestial Assault as well because I like the Gust Cloak creatures. This was generally a tough one between the two. But I went with Celestial Assault in the end, mostly because I like the Gust Cloak creatures. It's got like a few other decent cards in there, like Dispersing Orb. I remember actually being really harsh on this card when I was reviewing the deck, but looking back on it, I think it's fine as a kind of repeatable bounce effect. It's not obviously amazing by today's standards, but at the time, I guess it would have been sort of okay if you just need to push through and get a win. But yeah, I'm gonna go down and say Celestial Assault rather than Ivory Doom, and I'm probably going to immediately regret it about 2 minutes after publishing the video. Anyway, so Legions in 2003. Legions is a really fun set because it has only creatures. Those are the only new cards in it with just creatures. No instants, no sorceries, nothing like that. It's just creatures. That was the gimmick of the set. So we had Elvish Rage, which is mono green elves, as you can imagine. Morph Mayhem, which is white blue. It's deck all about morph, which is fine because that was a mechanic that was introduced in Onslaught block. Another Sliver deck. This is a properly good Slivers deck. So it's good for them to come back and have another crack after their first appearance back in Tempest. And then Zombies Unleashed, which is mono black zombies. What do you want to say? So yeah, some really good showings here. Actually, they're all pretty good. Morph Mayhem, I think, is the weakest, just because it's a little fiddly. But mono green elves, mono black zombies, and slivers. 3 really strong contenders there. I went with the slivers in the end. I do like the zombies one around. This was another tough choice. In the end, I went with slivers though. Because 2 really good rares, Brood Sliver and Essence Sliver. I mean, it's a deck full of slivers. What do you want, man? Like slivers are just really just casual gold, aren't they? They're just super fun. And then finally, we got Scourge in May 2003. So we got Goblin Mob, which is mono red goblins, as you can expect. Max Attacks, which is black green, has this kind of theme of wanting to play things with high mana costs because you got some effects that care about high mana costs. It's got a minor beast theme. It's a bit weird if I'm honest. Pulverize is the same. It's blue red, and it's a deck that cares about high mana costs. You got cards like Scornful Egotist and Rush of Knowledge, stuff like that care about you having high mana cost permanents. And then Storm Surge, which is white blue, and because this Scourge is where the Storm mechanic was introduced, and this is a deck that's kind of trying to be about Storm, and it again doesn't quite have the because the Storm was in every color, and this is a deck that's trying to be about Storm, and there's only 3 cards in there with Storm, but whatever. Yeah. I think by far and the best way, the Goblin Mob one is the best. The other 3 are pretty weak. Max Attacks and Pulverize are really not that wonderful, if I'm honest. They're just not. It's just kind of a flaw. The theme is okay, but there just weren't the cards to make it work. In fact, I did a video about how these decks could work. I did a kind of a what could have been, where that whole idea of having high mana cost could work, but if it was blue and green instead, because blue and green had the tools to make it work, whereas blue red didn't and green black didn't. But anyway, talk about goblins. So you had Goblin Warchief, obviously, which is great, and then Siege Gang Commander, who is great and is still, I think, pretty good. It's mono red goblins, really, really strong. Weird to think that this is kind of, I was going to say this is the first precon about goblins. It's not, because you had the 7th edition one with goblins. But if you had that one, because this is only a couple of years after, or whatever, mix them together. You got some good goblins. There was goblins goblins all through the set. So yeah, I'm really glad actually this is a fun deck that waited until the last set in the block to release, because then it had the previous two sets to draw goblins from in as well. So yeah, really, really strong deck. Yeah. So that was it. So that was all of season 1. So there we go. That's all. That's all the decks that I liked. Man, I'm looking at Celestial Assault and really wishing it was Ivory Doom. So you know what, that one can be interchanged, I suppose. But yeah, that was all the decks that I thought out of season 1 were the best ones. So I would love to know what you think. Obviously, as I said at the start, this is obviously all my opinion. If you agree, if you disagree, if you had, if I didn't mention a deck here and you thought, it was better in some way, or like, you have just even just memories and like stories, anything like that. I love hearing people's stories associated with these Precon decks. Like, oh, I just got into Magic and I bought this deck and I played it, and and I had a bunch of fun with it. I love stories like that, and that's kind of why I started the whole channel ways, for people to share their memories about precons, because like I think that's such like precon Magic is like such peak Magic to me. I'm really going off script here, and not that there was a script, but like precon Magic, like casual kitchen table, you've just got a deck from like your shop, you open it up, you just shuffle up and start playing. That to me is like pure Magic. Like, unoptimized, janky, cards that you never would have considered playing, like become all stars for a single game because of the circumstances. That's what I think the hobby's about, and obviously I don't know. I'm really rambling there. Anyway. If you've got any thoughts, comments, stories, anything like that, stick a comment down below. I'd love to read them. I always respond to them. But yeah, leave a like, leave a comment, all that good YouTube stuff. Subscribe. If you liked this, I will carry on with it, because man, I really enjoyed going back and talking about these precons, which I haven't talked about, in say nearly like 3 years. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully I'll be back for more. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, and have a great day. Thanks for watching.